Okay, this is part 4 of the MAGNUSON 5th generation Toyota install video. This is where things get real. Part 1, 2, and 3 will be pinned in the description box below. I urge you to watch those prior to watching this video. But for those that already have, here we go. You're going to want to sit back, relax, and check this out. Okay, here we go. It's going to get real in this video. This is where everything is really going to start coming together. It's probably one of the most rewarding sections of this entire install. So let's jump right into it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also hit that notification bell. Now grab the tensioner assembly parts that are all pre-packaged. I'm showing them to you right here. We're going to install these. The first thing you're going to want to do is take a ratchet and release the tension on that bottom pulley right there that I've got the socket on. Release the tension on the belt and then remove that idler pulley above. Completely pull that out. There you go. Okay, grab yourself some Loctite 242 and the M10 by 55 millimeter stud provided. Put a little bit of Loctite on there and let's install it. You can either use a stud installation tool or just double nut it like I did right here. This stud is going to be going right back where you just pulled that idler pulley out of. It's going right back in. And this is what you want it to look like afterwards. Now, take a dial caliper and make sure that from the machine surface from the front of the engine to the end of the stud is 40 millimeters. Easy peasy. Like that. Now you're going to reinstall the idler pulley onto the stud you just put in and reinstall the belt. Now you're going to be removing the bolt that I'm pointing to right here by your oil filler cap. Pull that bolt right out. The next thing you're going to do is take this provided bracket and then also take this spacer and thread this spacer into the rear just like I'm showing you. And it says to make sure that it's threaded all the way in, but you can adjust it later if necessary. But this is the desired result right here. Bam! Now in the last step you remove this bolt. This is exactly where this bracket spacer is going to line up. So now you take the bracket with the spacer on the back and line it up just like I'm showing you right here. You line up the spacer to the place where you just pulled that long bolt out of, and when you get it right, it'll literally snap into place and stay there on its own. MAGNUSON did an amazing job with this stuff, I gotta tell you. Now take the M8 by 20 millimeter bolt, put some Loctite on it, and bolt it up right where I'm going to show you. Now take the M10 flange nut that they give you and put that on the stud with a little Loctite. And leave these, you'll be torquing these down later on. And before you torque them down, make sure the spacer that's on the front of the pulley bracket has a little gap right there. It's tough to see, but make sure there's a gap there before you torque these down. Once you see the gaps there and you're good to go, you're going to want to torque the M8 bolt down to 18 foot-pounds, and then you're going to torque the M10 flange nut to 25 foot-pounds. After torquing the M8 and M10, you will rotate the spacer until it makes light contact with the surface in the back. You see what I'm saying? You basically want the spacer that you put in on the back of this frame to lightly touch the metal of the truck engine. That means back this spacer out from behind and underneath until it's touching. It's tough to do, but I did it, and so can you. Again, you're going to take Loctite and you're going to put it on the provided M8 by 120 millimeter long bolt. And you're going to mount that bolt, which is an Allen head, right where I'm mounting it. And if you can't see it, I don't know what to tell you. I'm just kidding. It goes right here. You can't miss it. Torque that thing all the way in to 18 foot-pounds. Okay, next up, you're going to grab 3 M10 by 16 millimeter bolts. You're going to Loctite these 3 bolts. And these 3 bolts are going to be used to hold on the 2 smooth idler pulleys that are provided by MAGNUSON. I told you it was going to get good. Now it's getting good. Now that 3rd bolt's going to be used to mount the ribbed pulley wheel right there. Lovely. Now you're going to torque all 3 of these bad Larrys down to 25 foot-pounds each. 25 foot-pounds each. Dude, you're putting a supercharger on your 5th gen Toyota. How badass are you? Exactly. Now you're going to take the provided M8 by 65 millimeter bolt, hit that off with a little bit of Loctite, and you're going to use that to put the belt tensioner in place. Now flip to the back of the manual provided, or Google it, because you're going to put the new serpentine belt for the supercharger on. How sick is that? Isn't that awesome? It's so nice getting to the point of putting the belt on, and you're at it. So you rule, everyone else sucks. Don't forget that. Okay, putting the belt on, you're basically on your own because I couldn't get a video camera in there to show it. Plus, it's pretty rudimentary. You can figure it out. There's only one way that it will actually work. But I will link a diagram to the belt routing from the manual in the description box below, in case you're not using a manual or don't have a manual. You see what I'm saying? Because I'm just nice like that. But here's a hint. It's right there. You see it? How about now? There you go. You're welcome. Moving on. Once you get the belt in place, you're going to torque down the belt tensioner bolt to 18 foot-pounds. And yes, there's going to be slack left on the belt because you haven't put the supercharger in yet. So don't fret. All is well. Okay, with that out of the way, we're going to move to the rear of the engine right now towards the firewall and remove this vacuum line. You're going to pull this vacuum line off right here and replace it with a longer vacuum line that they supply. It's 3/16 by 20 inches long. I don't have any good video of it. I don't know why. Now on the opposite side of the intake manifold, you're going to see the PCV valve. You're going to take that spring clamp off and then remove that tube. You won't be using the hose again, but you're going to want to save the 2 spring clamps. And what you're going to do is take the provided hose they give you and some of the wire loom, and you're going to work the wire loom onto this new tube. This is going to be your new PCV valve with a little bit of protection because it's going to run right next to the supercharger. So work this on, put the 2 spring clamps on, and you're moving on. Just pop this hose with the clamp onto the PCV valve for now. Okay, your next move is see these two clips right here on the firewall? Remove them and discard it. You won't be using those over again. I used a flathead to get them to release. I saved them without destroying them, and you should too. Or not, I don't know. But at any rate, remove those two clips and discard. Okay, you've been working your butt off, so I guess it's time to take a break, because now things are about to get good. But let's take a quick break real quick.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the...
Okay, here we go. Now either take the OEM gasket off your intake manifold or take the new OEM gasket that you bought and install it onto the supercharger. I can't imagine using the old one over again when you're installing a almost $10,000 supercharger. But some people don't like to spend the extra $8. I did, you should too, or not, whatever. I just wouldn't want to have any issues after the installation was done. And I mean, come on, it's $8. But I digress. Okay, now turn the supercharger housing over like this and remove the 13 M6 by 20 millimeter bolts and the 4 M6 by 50 millimeter bolts that hold the lid assembly on, taking note of their locations because some bolts are longer than others. Don't lose these bolts. And do not remove the bolt between the two coolant barbs. The two coolant barbs shown right here. Remove the lid assembly and record the serial number, which is located at the outside of the supercharger gear cover for warranty purposes. The serial number is also located on the shipping box, so take note of that. The next thing you want to do is apply Loctite to the 6 manifold bolts and remove the tape from your intake on your engine and make sure it's clean and there's no dust or anything. Be careful. Make sure it's sterile. You don't want to regret doing this, or you don't want to do this twice. Now, carefully position the supercharger with the gasket already on it onto your intake manifold. I'll tell you what, you should have somebody help you do this, because I was on a step ladder reaching over to my intake and I jacked my back big time. Now I did this about a month ago installing this, and I'm still nursing a bad back. Never hurt my back in my entire life. But the supercharger has enough weight and it's awkward enough where you can hurt yourself. If you can get someone to help you, have somebody help you. At any rate, when you install this, just make sure when you place it on the intake, you don't disrupt the gasket. That's the biggest thing. Make sure that intake gasket is still in the same place it's supposed to be. You can do it. I did it by myself. I hurt my back, but I still got the supercharger installed properly, and so can you. Before you install the manifold bolts, go all the way around the supercharger. Make sure everything is clear. Make sure that no hoses are pinched, that everything is clear, and that this is sitting perfectly on the intake. You want to do this one and done. You don't want to mess around with this. So once you decide that that's all good to go, start lining up the manifold bolts and then put them all in and start them by hand. Once you're confident that there's no obstructions and all is well, torque down the manifold bolts to 28 Newton meters or 21 foot-pounds. And start from the center and work your way outwards in a crisscross pattern. But you already knew that. The next thing you're going to do is take this provided bracket and mount it to the side of the supercharger to the engine block. Make sure you Loctite both the bolts. Loctite everything. That's what I do. And then torque this down to 21 foot-pounds or 28 Newton meters. The next thing you're going to do is take the bracket that you loosened up earlier in this process and secure it to the side of the supercharger. And just like last time, 28 Newton meters or 21 foot-pounds. The next thing you need to do is remove off the old intake, remove this bracket, and then install it on the bracket you just installed on the rear of the supercharger. Now I had to do a little modification and I'll show it to you. The next thing you got to do is replace the little bracket that you removed earlier, and this is what I ended up doing to make it all work. I can't quite explain it, but you've got this as a visual, so if this helps you, I'm glad. If it doesn't, I don't know what to tell you, but this is what I ended up. I had to do a little modification to make this work, but like I said, now you can see what I did. I had to wing it. I had nothing to fall back on, so I made it work. The little clip in my hand is so that you can put a wiring loom harness clip back on like factory. And what I'm showing you right here actually worked. So I hope it helps. Now it's impossible to see because I don't have the footage, but those two hoses right there have a clamp on them. The clamp is going to clip right onto the bracket you just installed. So clip that on after you've got this bolted down and you're good to go. Back to the supercharger. Okay, the next move is going to be actually installing the lid on the supercharger. Now to do this, I pre-Loctited all the bolts. I put the bolts back in the holes where they belong because some of them are in a really, really tight spot, especially at the firewall. But they're all doable, they're all reachable. The 3 bolts in the very rear, I used a ratcheting open-end wrench to get those buttoned down because there was no other way to reach them. You'll see what I'm saying. Once you have the lid in position, you're going to go around and tighten all 17 of the bolts. Gradually tighten the bolts starting from the middle and working your way outwards in a crisscross pattern. Make 3 passes at lower torque settings as you work your way up to the final torque of 108 inch-pounds. This is important. Or maybe it isn't, but I take it seriously and you should too. Specs are specs are specs. Okay, now that you got the supercharger buttoned up, you're going to install the belt over all the pulleys, including the supercharger, except the ribbed idler pulley. Place a 1/2 inch breaker bar in the square slot on the tensioner and rotate it counterclockwise to release the tension. Now, initially, this thing's going to feel like it's stuck or it's broken, but it's not. You just got to give it a real good push. And then finally, it operates as you would imagine it would. You see what I'm saying? But originally, I thought I installed it improperly, or it was stuck, broken, or defective, but it wasn't. So that's all you need to do. Put a square breaker bar in there and give it a good turn. And that'll enable you to get the belt right up and over the supercharger pulley. And once you get it on the supercharger pulley, now you can slide it over the red ribbed pulley. And then all is well. It's back where it belongs. You're in business. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is take that hose you ran for the PCV valve and push it onto this fitting on the bottom of the supercharger. Okay, again, due to time constraints, I'm going to have to forward this to part 5. Links will be below. If this video was helpful, make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below, and I will return the favor. I am out.